a sealed envelope, a name scribbled in fading ink, and a timepiece said to carry the weight of a crumbling empire. When Prince Harry unveils what the Duke of Windsor truly left behind strictly for Archie, the monarchy's facade begins to splinter. But who knew? And why was it kept secret all these years? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The legend of the Duke of Windsor's lost possessions had always hovered like a ghost over royal history, a faint whisper of regret, rebellion, and unfinished business. For decades, the mystery of his personal effects, particularly a rumoured watch, had become the stuff of hushed speculation among royal historians and biographers. This wasn't just any timepiece. It was believed to be the very one he wore the day he signed away the crown, walking into exile with Wallis Simpson and leaving behind a monarchy shaken to its core. The watch, it was said, vanished into obscurity. No one knew if it had been discarded, buried, or guarded, with an intent known only to the late Duke himself. Prince Harry never imagined the storm he would awaken when, while going through a collection of private items once owned by Queen Elizabeth II, he stumbled upon a weathered envelope tucked between pages of a locked portfolio. There were whispers that it was one of the few remaining artifacts the Queen never handed over to the royal archivists, a decision that, in hindsight, hinted at knowledge she perhaps never intended to share. Inside the envelope, hidden beneath documents no one dared claim ownership of, was the infamous watch. And with it, a brief note unsigned, unadorned but undeniably potent. Its presence sent a chill through the room. For Harry, this wasn't just a historical curiosity. It was something far more personal, more intimate, more dangerous. From the moment he laid eyes on the watch, Harry felt a pull, an ancestral tether to a man whose legacy, while disgraced in royal circles, seemed strangely familiar. The Duke of Windsor had once defied an empire for love. Harry, too, had walked away. Both were vilified, misunderstood, marked by the crown as cautionary tales. But now, that bond once invisible was crystallizing into something tangible. Archie, the child Harry had vowed to protect from royal machinery, was suddenly tied to a lineage of rebellion by more than just blood. It wasn't about inheritance in the financial sense. The value wasn't in the gold, the brand, or the craftsmanship. It was what the watch symbolized. It was time frozen in resistance. Palace aides, upon learning what Harry had discovered, reacted with eerie quiet. No press release, no denial, no validation, just silence. A silence that reeked of knowledge they'd hoped would never resurface. For some within those gilded halls, the re-emergence of the Duke's personal relics was like summoning a royal ghost best left buried. But others, particularly those closest to Harry, began to sense that this wasn't merely the resurfacing of a forgotten watch. It was a message left for the future. A message, it seemed, meant for Archie. Whispers grew louder across corridors and corners of royal estates. Advisors privately feared what else might be connected to this artifact. Could it be proof of a quiet lineage of royal descent? Could Archie, unknowingly, be the symbol of a new unspoken inheritance? As the monarchy tried to remain composed, the sense of unease thickened. Something monumental had been triggered, and there was no way to rewind the clock. But nothing could prepare the monarchy for what Harry would reveal next, not just an object, but a defiant message carved in royal steel. Br. When a palace historian dared to open the Duke's sealed timepiece case, they didn't just find gold, they found a name. Not Harry, not William, but Archie. Etched deliberately, protected for decades. A direct line from one royal outcast to another. There, resting beneath the weight of scandal and time, was the infamous watch, its gold casing slightly dulled by age, but its aura untouched. Every detail of its preservation betrayed care, even obsession. A velvet-lined case, sealed within another locked box, hidden from view for decades. But the true rupture came not from the metal itself, but from within it. As the historian gently twisted open the back, expecting serial numbers or family crests, the room fell silent. For inscribed in clean, deliberate lettering was a single word: Archie. Not Edward, not George, not even Charles, but Archie. A name the monarchy had in many ways tried to minimize, a name now immortalized in steel, Experts were summoned immediately, authenticity confirmed. No doubt remained this wasn't a forgery or a modern tampering. It was real. The Duke of Windsor had left his mark, and with it, an unmistakable inheritance for the child of a prince who walked away. Whispers turned to thunder within royal corridors that a former King Edward VIII, the very man who relinquished the throne for love, had not only left behind a symbol of his departure, but had linked it to Archie, a child born of another royal departure, was almost too poetic to be coincidence. Theories ignited like wildfire. Had Edward foreseen the cycle? Had he intended, even in death, to acknowledge a future heir not by title, but by defiance? Those familiar with the Duke's letters remembered his bitter reflections, his disdain for royal rigidity, his torment over being branded traitor rather than human. In private notes written late in life, Edward often wondered if someone, someday, would choose family over duty and be recognized not as a disgrace, but as a symbol of transformation. Now that prophecy had a name. The firm was caught flat-footed. Queen Camilla, sources say, was livid. Her voice echoed down palace halls, demanding answers. William, normally composed, reportedly asked to see the engraving himself, only to storm out minutes later. No statement was released, no denial issued, only a suffocating silence that suggested the weight of this revelation was far greater than anyone publicly admitted. For a monarchy built on hierarchy, protocol and tradition, this act, posthumous or not, felt like a challenge. A buried royal had reached across time to place a symbolic crown on the head of the one child the palace had refused to call prince. It wasn't about power, it wasn't about gold. It was about memory, about legacy. Edward had chosen his exile and marked it with time, and now through one quiet inscription he had chosen again. This time it was Archie, this time it was louder. Yet it wasn't just the engraving that sent chills down royal spines. It was the letter tucked beneath the velvet tray. A single letter, fragile, yellowing, handwritten, marked for the boy who bears my echo. Inside, the Duke of Windsor, once King Edward VIII, penned a royal bombshell meant to skip generations and strike the heart of a future rebellion. As the watch case was carefully dismantled and examined, what lay beneath the velvet tray wasn't jewelry, wasn't jewels, it was history inked in pain. Folded tightly, brittle with time, the paper bore a heading that stopped every breath in the room. The first lines were haunting in their clarity, defiant in tone. If you are reading this, it began. Then the house has allowed the storm to circle once more. What followed was a raw confession, the kind never meant for public eyes. The Duke's words bled with sorrow and quiet rage. He described the suffocation he endured within the gilded prison of royalty, the expectations that buried his voice, and the loneliness that came after he gave it all up for love. They took my title, he wrote, but they never took my truth. It wasn't just a man recalling his downfall, it was a monarch lamenting the institution he once upheld. Yet the letter wasn't addressed to a son or sibling. It was meant for someone else entirely my heir, not by blood, but by spirit. That phrase would come to define everything. The Duke had not written to reclaim a throne, but to bless a defiance he recognized in another. He hinted at watching the family from afar, seeing glimpses of rebellion reawakened in the most unexpected corners. One day, he warned, the crown will crush another soul, and when it does, this message must reach him. The parallels to Harry were undeniable. Both were adored, then judged. Both made the impossible choice to leave. But where Edward left for love, Harry left for survival. And now, both had sons. Sons born outside the crown's rigid shadows. The letter twisted deeper into prophecy. Edward spoke of cycles within the monarchy, of how silence was inherited more viciously than power. He spoke of the child who would be unclaimed yet watched, spoken of yet never spoken to. He will not look like a king, Edward wrote, but he will carry the memory of one. And then came the final line, a sentence that scorched through time with unrelenting force. Give this to the one they won't expect, he'll understand. It wasn't a request, it was a command, a torch passed not by decree, but by recognition. And in that moment, Harry understood. This was never just about the watch. It was about destiny refused, dignity reclaimed, and a warning passed down like a whispered truth too dangerous for the throne to hold. What shocked Harry wasn't merely the language, it was the emotion. The Duke's loneliness mirrored his own, the resin. Tea meant the confusion, the ache of being both loved and erased. Suddenly, everything, the watch, the engraving, the secrecy made sense. This wasn't an heirloom. It was a message in a bottle, tossed across generations, waiting for someone brave enough to open it. And just like that, a forgotten monarch lit a torch in the shadows, leaving Harry to carry it into the storm. When Prince Harry sat before the camera, trembling yet composed, the world expected another royal grievance. But instead, he read the letter aloud. And as he whispered Edward's last words, Buckingham Palace froze. This wasn't a press conference. It wasn't an interview or a staged appearance. It was something far more personal, an act of declaration wrapped in silence. With the Duke of Windsor's letter in hand and Archie's name still echoing in his mind, Harry made a choice, one that would rupture generations of discretion. He filmed a private video, intended at first only for the family, an unpolished, unscripted confession of what he'd found, what it meant, and why he couldn't bury it. His eyes were red but steady, his voice cracked but never wavered. He began not with his own words but Edward's. "Give this to the one they won't expect he'll understand." In that moment, Harry stopped being the rebel prince. He became the bridge between a silenced past and an unclaimed future. As he read, the air changed. The letter, though written long before Archie was born, seemed to breathe through the walls of the palace. Meghan, sitting just off camera, wept quietly. Her presence wasn't performative, it was protective. She had seen what the institution had done to Harry, and now she watched as he carried not just his pain, but Edward's too. She had urged caution, fearing the storm that would surely follow, but when the letter reached its crescendo, even she admitted this was no longer just about their story. This was history begging to be heard. Harry's voice broke on certain words. "They took my title, but they never took my truth." The line hit like a verdict. It was more than catharsis, it was confrontation. And behind the palace walls, the reaction was immediate. Charles, sources revealed, pleaded for restraint. He believed the letter should remain private, fearing its implications. But Harry was already too far gone, not in rebellion, but in resolve. His decision was final. A copy of the video, password protected, was shared with key family members. But the leak wasn't internal. It came from a source Harry never expected, someone who believed, perhaps rightly, that the world had a right to witness what royalty had tried to forget. The footage hit the media like a thunderclap. It wasn't slick or rehearsed, it was raw, blistering, deeply human. Harry didn't demand sympathy. He didn't ask for revenge, he simply told the truth and let the words of a former king speak louder than any tabloid. The public's reaction was divided but intense. Some saw bravery, others saw betrayal, but none could deny the emotional force of the moment. Harry had stepped out of the royal shadow and into a lineage of defiance that had waited too long to be recognized. But as the video spread, the focus shifted not to Harry, but to what it meant for Archie's future in the royal order. A boy too young to understand, yet burdened with a legacy centuries old. As the watch glimmered on his small wrist during a private family moment snapped by an insider, the media declared it Archie, heir of the exiled king. The image, quietly captured, was never meant for the world. But once it leaked, the impact was seismic. There was Archie, unaware of the storm his tiny wrist now commanded, wearing the very symbol that had once marked a royal abdication and now a silent revolt. He didn't know the history it carried, nor the whispers it would awaken. Yet in that simple gesture, a child playing, his wrist adorned by a monarch's forgotten timepiece, 1,000 years of royal tradition, trembled. The public, ravenous for meaning, called it fate. The institution called it dangerous. But to Harry and Meghan, it was something else entirely. It was inheritance redefined not by titles, but by truth. Meghan's reaction was swift, yet restrained. Protective by nature, she understood the power of images. She had lived through their weaponization. But this photo was different. It was not an attack, it was a moment. A fragile, accidental message the world was not ready to see. She feared what it might trigger, how it might paint a target on Archie, how it might invite judgment he hadn't earned. And yet, there was something poetic in it, something inevitable. The son of a prince who walked away, wearing the relic of a king who had done the same. Meghan had fought to give Archie freedom. Now that freedom was laced with history's heavy crown. Royal commentators quickly drew lines between Edward and Archie, calling the boy a modern symbol of ideological inheritance, not in bloodline, but in defiance. To them, it wasn't just a watch, it was a baton passed from one outcast to another. They analysed Edward's letter again, pored over old speeches, diary entries, and cryptic comments made in exile. Patterns began to emerge, codes, echoes, moments now reinterpreted as prophecy. Had Edward foreseen a royal future beyond the throne? Had he envisioned a child like Archie rising not in courtrooms but in conscience? The questions snowballed. Historians and former aides debated in hushed tones. Some labelled it romantic nonsense. Others warned it was a narrative the monarchy had no defence against. Inside the palace, tension hardened. Lines were drawn, old wounds reopened. Senior courtiers saw it not as coincidence, as a calculated move, an attempt to revive Edward's legacy through Harry's son, creating a dangerous duality within the royal bloodline. Is this defiance, one whispered, or destiny? It was a question no one dared answer publicly. But among the firm's inner circle, trust began to fray. What started as a gesture had turned symbolic, and symbols carry weight more than truth, sometimes more than power. The very identity of monarchy thrives on the perception of order. Now, that perception was splintering. Harry, for his part, made no apologies. In a rare statement to a close confidant, he made his stance unmistakable. "It's about truth, not thrones," he said. "About legacy, not lineage." His words rippled through the media, igniting fervent debate and exposing just how deeply this quiet rebellion had shaken the crown. For if Archie truly bore the echo of the exiled king, then the monarchy had a new chapter it never meant to write. Still, not everyone agreed, and behind gilded palace doors, fury erupted. Palace aides rushing through corridors, doors slammed, phones ringing off the hook. When Charles summoned emergency advisors, it was clear. This wasn't just scandal, it was a direct threat to royal succession optics. Inside the palace, panic did not wear the face of fear. It wore the cold, calculated mask of crisis management. King Charles, known for his emotional restraint, was visibly shaken. The news had spread too quickly. The image of Archie, the resurfaced letter, the symbolism of the watch. What began as a historical footnote had now exploded into a full-blown constitutional dilemma, leaving no room for spin or silence. The monarchy's clean lines were blurring, and Charles knew the cost. This wasn't about jewelry or sentiment anymore. This was about control, image, and the very structure of legacy itself. The crown had weathered storms, but this one carried the goes. T of Edward VIII, and the unspoken fear that Archie might symbolize a future. The monarchy wasn't prepared to acknowledge. Queen Camilla, never one to mask displeasure, reportedly lashed out in fury behind closed doors. "This can't go unchallenged," she snapped, her words ricocheting through already tense halls. To her, it wasn't just an embarrassment, it was a betrayal, a narrative hijacked by someone who had left. The palace media advisors scrambled. They issued hushed memos, drafted talking points, and attempted to counteract headlines that were growing more dangerous by the hour. But the machine was too slow. Social media had already turned the story viral. Archie's face was everywhere, so was the name Edward VIII. And suddenly, discussions once confined to history books became trending topics: succession, rebellion, and whether the crown was losing grip on its own narrative. William, meanwhile, remained silent, and that silence said everything. Torn between the brother he once protected and the institution he would someday lead, William stood at the crossroads of blood and duty. A private meeting with Charles ended without comment. Staffers said little, but their faces betrayed it all: uncertainty, conflict, betrayal. William's loyalty to the crown had never been questioned, but now the crown was pushing back against his own flesh and blood. And somewhere between outrage and restraint, he found himself caught in a war that no coronation would fix. Princess Anne, the steadiest voice in the family, finally broke her silence in a way only she could, blunt and unapologetic. "Let the dead stay dead," she said in a closed-door meeting. Her message was clear: stop digging up ghosts that threaten the foundation. But not everyone agreed. Some feared burying it would make it worse. Others believed denying it only fed the fire. Behind the curtains, old alliances began to crack. Courtiers who had served 3 monarchs now questioned the wisdom of silence. Confidants whispered of fractures not seen since the Diana years. The unity so often presented to the world was beginning to unravel, and still the headlines refused to die. A forgotten king's gift rattles the crown. Archie, the echo of abdication? No media strategy could contain what had already been unleashed. The more the palace tried to steer the narrative, the more it slipped from their grasp. But while the palace scrambled to restore order, one elderly royal emerged with a memory that reignited the fire. Decades of silence, one afternoon tea, and then Princess Alexandra speaks. "I remember the watch," she says quietly, "and I remember what he said about leaving it to the one who understood exile." The revelation did not come from leaked documents or digital records, it came from memory. A memory long tucked away, never shared, perhaps because it hurt too much to relive. Princess Alexandra, rarely one to seek headlines, emerged from the periphery with a voice that carried the weight of history. She had been young, barely into adulthood, when she last saw the Duke of Windsor. It was during one of his quiet returns to England, rare, secretive, and filled with tension. But Alexandra had been there, and she had listened, and what she remembered now sent tremors through the already cracking walls of Buckingham Palace. The watch, the conversation, and the cryptic statement the Duke had made one day: "This will belong to someone who chooses exile not as shame but as clarity." At the time it seemed poetic, now it felt prophetic. In soft, measured words, Alexandra shared more. Edward, she said, had been frail but focused, his mind sharp despite the years of distance. He spoke not of regret, but of injustice. He lamented how the crown had turned loyalty into a trap, love into scandal. He knew his decision had cost him the world's respect, yet he believed it had preserved his soul. And then, almost as if speaking into the future, he expressed hope that someone would come not to reclaim his legacy, but to understand it. According to Alexandra, he referred to this future heir as unlike the rest, someone not raised for the throne but born into its shadow. She hadn't thought much of it then, but now, with Archie at the center of a spiraling royal storm, the echoes were undeniable. Her tone carried a deep, aching empathy for Edward, and beneath it, a quiet frustration, perhaps even condemnation toward the system that cast him aside so easily. Without naming names, Alexandra made her disapproval known. The monarchy, in her view, had never learned how to treat those who chose freedom over obligation. She saw in Archie what Edward had seen, the innocence of a child unburdened by protocol, yet already marked by it. And when asked, directly and privately, if she believed Edward had intended the watch for Archie, Alexandra didn't hesitate. "He meant it for him," she said. "No speculation, no hedging, just certainty. A royal seal not made of wax but of memory." The reaction from palace aides was immediate and filled with dread. Alexandra was untouchable. A royal of the old guard, beloved for her discretion, respected for her integrity. They could not silence her. They could not contradict her without fracturing their own image. And so, her quiet confirmation rang louder than any public statement ever could. It was not a debate, it was a reckoning. Her words didn't just validate Harry's claims. They transformed them into royal truth. And with Alexandra's soft confirmation, the tide turned, and the world wanted more than silence. Across London, crowds gather outside the palace. In America, talk shows ignite. From Nairobi to Toronto, headlines scream, "The Forgotten Key. NG's watch a future claimed by a child." What began as a private heirloom becomes a global debate. The fallout of the revelation didn't remain inside royal walls for long. It exploded across continents, turning from whispered scandal into an international reckoning. Major newspapers dedicated entire front pages to the story. News anchors dissected every detail of the watch, the letter, the legacy. From royal analysts to psychologists, from cultural historians to conspiracy theorists, everyone had an opinion. The symbolic weight of the handover wasn't just a family affair anymore. It had become a litmus test for loyalty, identity, and the ever-shifting role of monarchy in a modern world. The past had returned with a vengeance, and this time it brought receipts. Supporters of Harry and Meghan, particularly those who had watched the couple's journey through exile with empathy, rallied behind the gesture. To them, the Duke of Windsor's watch represented something far bigger than royal jewelry. It was a symbol of resistance, a reward for truth-telling, a connection between those who chose principle over privilege. In their eyes, Archie wasn't just a royal child, he was the embodiment of a new narrative, one unchained from the cold traditions of the crown. Online forums flooded with emotional tributes. Protest art surfaced in major cities. Young voices, once disinterested in monarchy, now found a thread of relevance woven through a forgotten king and a modern toddler who had never asked for the spotlight. But not everyone saw the symbolism as redemptive. Traditional royalists condemned the act as dangerous provocation. Royal commentators with decades of loyalty to the institution called it reckless, irresponsible, and above all, a threat to stability. Some accused Harry of rewriting history for sympathy, of leveraging pain for power. They insisted the Duke of Windsor's exile was a disgrace, not a prophecy. To them, Drawing a line between Edward and Archie was not poetic, it was sacrilegious. The monarchy, they argued, was not a canvas for rebellion, and any attempt to reframe its fallouts as noble was an attack on its foundations. Still, the debate only drew more attention. Archival scholars returned to old records, unearthing letters, diaries, and transcripts with renewed interest. Edward's words were now reread through a sharper lens, no longer dismissed as ramblings of a disgraced royal, but as coded reflections of a man who had seen the system from the inside and chosen to leave it. Academic panels were hastily formed, documentaries greenlit, biographers scrambled to edit forthcoming manuscripts. The narrative had shifted. The Duke of Windsor, once consigned to scandal, was being reintroduced as a figure of introspection and dissent. Among the young, something curious began to stir. Generation after generation had been raised to see monarchy as spectacle, but Archie's unexpected role lit a fire. Social media exploded with tributes, reinterpretations, even streetwear branded with the phrase "heir of the exiled." What had begun as an old man's watch was now a movement. Archie and the watch trended for days across platforms, not as gossip, but as a cultural statement. A relic had become a revolution. The monarchy, unbending for centuries, now found itself caught in a story it could no longer control. But as the world watches this modern royal saga unfold, one final chapter remains, and it's hidden in the legacy vault. Just as the dust begins to settle, a whispered clue leads Harry to investigate deeper. Beneath the Windsor archives lies a vault unopened for over 70 years, and inside, more than just the watch, letters, tapes, secrets that could rewrite royal history forever. It was a passing comment, barely a sentence, but it changed everything. During their final conversation, Princess Alexandra had leaned in and murmured something that hadn't left Harry's mind since. There was more, she'd said. He didn't trust anyone else with it. She was referring not to the watch, but to something else, something she believed Edward had left hidden deeper within the royal archives. And so, with the world still echoing from the shock of the watch's revelation, Harry requested quiet access to the private Windsor records. It wasn't granted easily. It took hours of negotiation, the invoking of personal rights, and the final reluctant blessing of Charles himself. But eventually, the doors were opened. Deep beneath the stone floors of the archive, in a climate-controlled room forgotten by time, sat a vault sealed in 1952. The logbooks labelled it as personal restricted. No entries had been made since. When the lock finally clicked open, Harry didn't know what he expected, but what he found stopped him cold: stacks of letters, tied in silk ribbon, old leather notebooks filled with dense, slanted handwriting, and most chilling of all, 5 unmarked audio tapes. The handwriting was unmistakable, Edward's voice frozen in ink and tape, waiting for someone who would dare to listen. As Harry sifted through the artifacts, a pattern emerged. This wasn't a personal diary, it was a strategic archive. A confession, yes, but also a map. In a quiet corner of the vault, Harry inserted the first tape into an old playback device, its mechanics groaning to life. Then came the voice, raspy, deliberate, unmistakably royal. Edward began not with dates or pleasantries, but with intent. "If you're hearing this," he said, "then they have failed to silence me again." The room fell still. The recording spoke of betrayal, of manipulation within the palace, of alliances that protected the image of the monarchy at the expense of truth. He named names. He described events never recorded in official archives. He hinted at secrets the Crown had buried under decades of curated